Susan, you're on.
I think.
Susan looks like she is frozen.
Yes.
So if she can hear us, she'll be logging in and out. So a little technical difficulty, but let me do the thing. Could I ask Jane Schofield, if you're out there, I think you are, to type in a question so that we know that the question function is working on the right-hand side of your screen.
Lisa, well, she's not there yet, but let me ask, can you guys see a question option on the right-hand side of your?
Yeah, while you were frozen, Susan, Jane Schofield.
Ask a question?
Yeah, Susan, while you were frozen for a second, I asked Jane Schofield, and so there's a couple of people that have typed in, yes, they can see it and they can do it. So I am going to, Susan, are you frozen again? It appears yes. So that's why even though I'm not, hi, hi, it's Mark Hendrickson. I'm going to just do some really brief stuff while Susan is hopefully scrambling to get back on, and there she's coming. But welcome to today's Housing Programs 101 session. So that we don't end up blowing all of our time, I'm going to ask Lisa to go through the logistics, and then I'll do our sponsor recognition, and then hopefully Susan will be back on to take over the panel.
Thank you. This is Lisa Jahed. I'm your technical assistant for today's webinar. All participants have been muted upon entry. We do ask that you type any questions in the question box. Thank you, Jane, Gloria, Stephen, and Kim for testing out that it works. In case you have not located your question box, it is on the right-hand side underneath. It's on your dashboard and it says questions. So you can type in your questions there. If you have any audio issues, we ask that you log out and try to log back in. You can also send a question or an item right to me on the question box. The audio call-in number is 562-247-8422. So if all else fails, call in and we will get you at least listening. And that's all I have for the session. Will be available on the Florida Alpha website starting as early as tomorrow. Mark or Susan? If
Susan, you're back.
You can hear me now? Okay.
So we're ready for you to give the sponsors a shout out.
Right. So we have, we are very grateful to all the sponsors that kept their funding in, even though we didn't have an actual physical conference, because it allowed us to do these webinars, allowed us to tape them, and allowed them to be on the Florida Alpha website. So I'd like to give a shout out to all the platinum or host sponsors, which include the Hillsborough HFA, Jacksonville HFA, Broward County HFA, Escambia County HFA, Pinellas County, and Miami-Dade, including also RBC, eHousing, Raymond James, and Leigh County HFA. So those were our platinum sponsors. They're listed there. And then our gold, as you can see, also stayed in, and we're really appreciative again of everybody that participated. I won't read those to you since we're a little bit behind here. And our silver sponsors, and then our bronze and breakfast. Ed Bazansky says, in terms of your breakfast for First Housing, you'll just have to call him for a cup of coffee at some point. That's the best it's going to get under these circumstances. So that's our sponsors. And again, we're very grateful for everybody staying in with us while we created a brand new way to do the conference. Next year, we should be back in, we should be in Sarasota, you know, if we can deal with all the issues that we have. Not us, but the world in general. So you are at the Housing Programs 101. We have 3 really good panelists today. I'm going to go ahead and give you like a short blurb on each one, and then they'll just hand off to each other as we move through the program. We hope that you will ask questions or write down questions as you go. We want to be able to interact and talk with you about the issues that we're going to bring up today. The first person that will be up after me will be Debbie Berner, who is a senior quantitative banker for RBC and has been employed by the firm since 1996. She probably wasn't born in 1966, so, you know, that would have been hard. She has 30 years of experience in mortgage-backed security industry and has also been an author of research publications. She serves as a quantitative service manager for Florida Housing Corporation. She also holds an MBA from Columbia Business School and a degree in economics from Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. So she's very smart. So if you need really complex things explained to you, you should call her. Ralph Stone is a director of housing and finance and community redevelopment in Broward County. He's going to be talking about his community and things that they have accomplished. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in English, which I could probably use from time to time, but he also has a master's degree in urban and regional planning at Florida State, which is useful to all of us these days. He has written and directed plans and programs that have received over 30 national or state awards in various expertise, and also the Governor's Award for the best large city comprehensive plan in the state of Florida, which is quite, is good, very good, especially these days. And he also is an expert witness for various things in courts. I doubt that he can help you if it's something other than environmental services or planning. Don't call him for anything personal. Randy Wilkinson is our third speaker today, and he's the Director of Housing for Escambia County HFA, and he joined the HFA in 2014 and works with homeownership programs in 14 different counties, as well as multifamily. His background, he has a Master of Administration degree and graduated with honors with University of West Florida in Pensacola, and a member of a lot of organizations, but his expertise is really working with local government, the SHIP plans, with the neighborhood services. He also worked with them for a long period of time, but he has a really good feel for local government and pairing with those as an HFA. So those will be our speakers. In terms of what we're trying to accomplish today, assuming that we're working with new board members, we think that it's first really important for you to understand the big picture. And the big picture of housing does not involve one local agency or one local entity or one particular federal agency that deals with housing. If you're dealing with housing issues and local government issues, you're dealing with both federal, state, and local programs. Some of them are run through specific federal agencies. Some of them are run through the tax code, like the tax exempt bonds and credits. But there are all these various layers that you start working with. And if you haven't been involved in housing before, the first thing you realize, like any business, they're all this alphabet soup of agencies and programs, and people just assume you're going to know that LITC is tax credits and that TE stands for tax exempt bonds and single family mortgage-backed securities. There's all these various terms, and they're all based on programs that have existed, some long-term, some short-term, but based, you know, tax-based, HUD-based, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they're all programs that different economic layers of individuals or developers can participate in. In terms of those programs and state programs, the state programs include the tax credit, sale, SHIP, redevelopment, and a lot of different things. But basically what happens in housing policy is usually there's a need, and then a program is developed to work with that need. A lot of it is based on the pure economic environment and any given time or place. Single family is both home ownership loans and down payment assistance. Multifamily is referring to rental housing, large developments, small developments, acquisition rehab, or new construction. But all the programs and policies are developed is to deal with a specific economic climate. And that is, if it's low interest rates, certain programs work better. If it's high interest rates, certain programs work better. If it's high interest rates and other economic conditions, you may need subsidies, which a lot of these extra programs have been developed to deal with. But the bottom line is the right policy, the right housing program has to meet the current economic environment to work for either single family or multifamily. So if you develop a plan on a local level or trying to create a program, you're normally addressing a specific lack of resources in some area based on high interest rates, low interest rates, equity needed, or something of that nature. And so all of the programs are developed around that. So when you're looking at something at a local level on what you want to accomplish in your local HFA, you have to see what resources are out there for you in order to address the needs that you have locally. And one size does not fit all, which is what this is kind of about this morning. We're going to start with Debbie this morning, who's going to be dealing on the single family side. Ralph will be talking more about his local community and resources that were needed in a way that they found to do that. Randy will be speaking to the local resources and his experiences with working with the SHIP program and various things that have been available to us. So Debbie, why don't you kick us off?
Great. Thank you, Susan, and welcome everyone to Housing Programs 101. I've been on this panel at Florida Alpha for many years, not since 1966, but sometimes it feels like that, when it was called Bonds 101. And really now we should be calling it Financing Single Family Home Ownership 101, because the goal of the HFAs has not changed, which is providing assistance to first-time home buyers in the form of a reduced mortgage rate and or down payment assistance. But the financial tools used to provide that benefit has significantly changed since the Great Recession and mortgage meltdown of 2008. And I like being on this panel because I've served on boards for nonprofits and as a board member. And you realize staff and professionals talk in professional code, and you get lost in the concepts being presented to the board if you don't know the jargon or you don't remember what the acronyms mean. So please respond immediately if you have any questions regarding any terms or acronyms that you don't recall the meaning that I might speak to. So the first slide is single family financing options. So a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, all local housing finance authorities issued tax-exempt single family mortgage revenue bonds. And the proceeds of the bond sales were used to finance single-family mortgages in the respective counties. So now let's fast forward to modern times. These same single-family mortgages are financed now through a sale. But let's talk about what hasn't changed. The two most important parties are the lenders and the borrowers or the homeowners. They don't know and they don't care how the mortgage is financed. All they care about is that the funds are available and what is the mortgage rate. So there's a consortium of lenders with a relationship with the HFA. They originate a mortgage with down payment assistance, and we also call that DPA for short, with a first-time home buyer. A master servicer then buys the loan and the DPA from the lender, and then the master servicer aggregates all these loans and they turn it into a mortgage-backed security, also known as an MBS. And there are three types of mortgage-backed securities. There's Ginnie Mae, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. And then the HFA's trustee purchases the MBS from the master servicer and reimburses them for the DPA loan proceeds which they fronted. So now here is where it differs. In the past, the trustee used bond proceeds to purchase the mortgage-backed security. But now it is more popular with the locals for the trustee to sell the mortgage-backed security in the absence of bond proceeds. So there is an active open market to buy and sell mortgage-backed securities, and that's called the TBA market. TBA simply stands for to be announced, and it gets its name from the notion that the trustee is selling a generic mortgage-backed security into the market, a mortgage-backed security that hasn't been given a name or a number or a CUSIP yet, but the terms of the security are pretty much well known. The mortgage rate, the size of the security, what the maturity is. And until it receives a CUSIP or a pool number, it's just called TBA, to be assigned or to be announced. Can we go to the next slide? So what else hasn't changed is the board's role in determining who benefits from their programs by setting the programmatic requirements. Generally, this includes that the borrower be a first-time home buyer, with exceptions for veterans and properties located in areas of the county that are targeted for development. It must be a principal residence because you want to focus on helping people buy their first home and not their vacation home, and targeting families with low to moderate income and homes below a certain purchase price. And lenders are provided a comprehensive program guide to make sure the lender adheres to the HFA's programs. The next slide, please. HFAs aren't working in a vacuum. They're not pulling these constraints out of the air. In order for a loan to receive favorable tax treatment, tax-exempt financing, they have to be bond eligible. And the terms I just discussed, first-time home buyer, purchase price limits, income limits, how you prove that you're a first-time home buyer, how family income limits are calculated, or what makes a loan bond eligible. And the HFA board can decide to relax some of the terms in order to broaden the universe of borrowers while still maintaining the mission of the HFA. For example, they can increase the purchase price limits. They can accept other proofs of first-time home ownership other than the tax requirement that you provide 3 years of tax returns. Or you can calculate income eligibility based on just the borrower's income rather than the entire household income. If these loans are adopted, then the loan is no longer bond eligible. So it's not a problem if the HFA isn't issuing bonds, and it gives the HFA flexibility to further their mission. However, we go to the next slide. Here's a trade-off. If the HFA decides to relax some of the criteria, then they cannot offer an MCC. An MCC is a mortgage credit certificate. And it's a nifty tool that an HFA can use to pass on an incredible tax benefit to a home buyer, which reduces the overall effective mortgage rate to a borrower in the form of a tax credit. Note that an MCC is not a deduction. It doesn't reduce the borrower's taxable income. It is a direct tax credit, and it directly reduces the amount a borrower owes in taxes up to a cap of $2,000 per year. Well, if the borrower doesn't pay taxes, it's not much of a benefit. And the HFA determines how much of a benefit is provided by deciding how much of a tax credit can be applied on an annual basis, anywhere between 10% and 50%. And the amount of benefit provided is directly correlated to the amount of volume cap that is needed. I'm not going to get into the math of how the benefit is calculated, but I'm happy to have a one-on-one session with anyone interested in learning the mortgage math here. But suffice it to say, based on the example in the PowerPoint, a homeowner with a 5% mortgage rate offered a 50% MCC by an HFA can end up paying an effective mortgage rate of 3.51%. So I'll say that again. A 5% mortgage rate is an effective 3.51% mortgage rate. That's a significant savings. And if we use today's rate, let's say 3 5/8, 3.625%, a borrower's effective mortgage rate can be low as 2.16%. So MCCs are very powerful financing tools, So forgoing this benefit by allowing non-bond eligible mortgages should be seriously considered. The next slide. And one more area where the board has a lot of influence is determining the amount and type of DPA or down payment assistance for a homeowner, which is limited by the HFA's resources. When HFAs were first originated, they existed to provide a mortgage rate that was below market rate because interest rates were so high. Interest rates are extraordinarily low, and HFAs really can't offer a mortgage rate that's lower than what they can get in the market. But what the resource they do have is providing down payment assistance. And the form of the down payment assistance is provided is very critical. The first is a grant. As a type of down payment assistance, and a grant means that the borrower never has to pay back the loan. It's not a loan, never have to pay back the gift. And in the past, HFAs funded grants through federal government funds like the hardest hit funds provided in the aftermath of the financial crisis. When we were doing bonds, the HFAs offered a grant option where the borrower paid a higher interest rate on their mortgage and they got a bit of down payment assistance on the upfront. So they paid for it over time with a higher mortgage rate. So grants are now being, there are HFAs offering grants now, but the problem with a grant is that it's forgiven immediately, and some lenders are offering borrowers a mortgage rate with a grant and then automatically, or in a few months down the road, refinancing them into a lower mortgage rate. So investors aren't real keen on high interest rate mortgages with grants because they realize that their investment's going to prepay rather quickly. The second kind, which we're seeing more of, is a non-amortizing second, which is due on sale. It's a 0% mortgage. And this mortgage is due when, the second mortgage is due when the first mortgage is retired, either by sale or refinancing. And it's generally somewhere between $7,500 and $15,000 based on the HFA's resource. And the third type is a quasi-grant. The amount due on the mortgage declines over time by a certain percentage so that if the borrower stays in the home for an extended period of time, they do not have to pay back that down payment assistance loan. And it was really created to get over the hump that if you get a grant, it would be, you could refinance it immediately. So if anybody has any questions about what I just presented, please let me know. And I'm going to hand this back to you, Susan.
Okay. Hold on a second. Ralph, you're up next. And again, we're going to be talking about what he has done locally. And please remember to type in your questions. And Mark will be looking for them and let us know if there's things that need to be looked at that time. Okay, Ralph.
All right. Hello, everyone. Glad to be with you this afternoon. I wanted to touch on 3 programs that we have been involved in Broward County. The first is the initiative to modify the county charter to add an affordable housing trust fund. And then from there led to significant budget allocation for gap financing to assist in the construction of new affordable housing units. And then 2 construction projects that the HFA has been directly involved in. So in 2015, the county's Charter Review Commission recommended that the county charter be amended to include an affordable housing trust fund. It was overwhelmingly approved, and there was no dedicated funding source, but there was a recognition that the board was going to start looking for a way to fund the project. And a number of things occurred that moved the community toward significant additional gap financing. One was that the Florida International University updated the countywide housing needs assessment, which they had done every 3 years for about the last 10 or 12 years. And I'll share some statistics with you in a second. They also were contracted to do commercial and residential rational nexus studies that basically concluded that both commercial and residential new development do in fact generate a demand for new affordable housing. And finally, the business community about the same time, the major association in Broward County, the Broward Alliance, in their annual retreat ranked affordable housing as the #1 priority. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so here are a number of statistics, and I'm only going to touch briefly on the ones that are bold, which are a little bit shocking for me, even though we've been dealing with affordable housing for many years in Broward County. As we sit here today, less than 13% of all households can afford the median price home, which by the way now is up to $365,000. Literally 54% of all employees in the county are employed in low-wage service sector jobs below 60% of area median income. And among a number of statistics that rank Broward County very low nationally in affordable housing factors, the Schimberg study, the most recent one, indicated that Broward County was the last and the only county in the state with less than 25 affordable housing units for every 100 residents at 60% AMI. Next slide, please. So among the things that occurred was the Housing Finance Authority actually engaged our financial advisor to evaluate the county's contribution to Sadowski over a 10-year period. And long story short, as is reflected in this slide, it indicated that Broward County was only getting 50 cents on the dollar for the money that was being contributed. And you can see in FY19, the county contribution to the Sadowski Local and State Housing Trust Fund was almost $36,000. The other numbers you see back across the chart are a combination of SHIP and sale awards. But I will tell you in FY19, the SHIP award for Broward County for all of the cities, and by the way, we have 15 entitlement cities, was $2.5 million. So that alone set off some aggravation and kind of turned up the heat on the discussion for affordable housing funding. Next slide, please. It's just a quick representation that since Florida Housing started doing new multifamily construction back in '82, in spite of the significant contribution that Broward County has made in the trust funds, we've been significantly behind other counties in the large urban category. And by the way, there's a number of good reasons for that. In Broward, literally, there's no vacant land left, and I mean that literally. Land cost recently in the urban areas was $10 million an acre, which leads to mid-rise and high-rise development under the South Florida Building Code, which is all concrete and steel. You can't do sticks and bricks. So the risk for developers to do deals down here is high, and without gap financing and other sources to give them some better reason to take the challenge of putting a deal together, it just wasn't happening. Next slide, please. So one of the things that the Board of County Commissioners did, which is a little unique, in Broward County there are 13 CRAs with tax increment financing, and they're starting to expire. In fact, the first 2 expire this year, which is the Fort Lauderdale Beach and the Pompano Beach CRAs. And the board now has an adopted policy that the increments, which basically is county general fund dollars that are recovered in effect from expiring tax increment areas, 1/2 will go to economic development and the other 1/2 goes to affordable housing. So you can see that this year we are estimated to get $2.2 million. In fact, the board has budgeted $2.8 million from this source. And as it plays out over 10 years, you can see in FY32, the affordable housing share will be up to $33 million a year for gap financing. Next slide, please. So what has that meant for the HFA and for affordable housing? In the 3 years since FY18, the Board of County Commissioners has allocated $5 million in 18, $5 million in FY19, in this current year, $10 million in gap financing. We've been able to take that funding with a little bit of additional extra funding, and each year issued a request for proposal, and we have in fact financed 8 projects, 4 of which have HFA bonds involved. The first year in FY18, in fact, we required that the projects use HFA bonds. In FY19 and 20, we made it more of an option. So you can see that we've produced just short of 900 units, and this coming October, we hope to put out another RFP for $12.8 million to continue this trend. Next slide, please. One of the interesting things that's happened as a result of the board's commitment to do gap financing is other cities have stepped up. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'll just point out, for example, in Fort Lauderdale, in last year's RFP, we had a bonus point system that every city that allocated a minimum of $1 million, the developer got 5 extra bonus points. Well, Fort Lauderdale awarded $5 million to go to with our $5 million to one of the deals, which gave the developer 25 bonus points and ranked them first. So it's just an indication that everyone in all of the other local governments in Broward County are starting to really pay attention and understand that we just can't solve this problem with federal home and block grants and state SHIP funding. Next slide, please. Next slide. So a quick final thought on, well, the preceding slide basically just indicated that the board has an initiative. It's called the March 10,000 Units, and we're generating about 1,000 units a year in Broward County. Last 2 projects I want to talk about. The first one, next slide please, is Franklin Park Estates. Broward County receives escheated lots that haven't paid their taxes from the tax collector every year, and at the end of the recession, we actually received a 21 lot subdivision in a very poor area of Broward County in Central County, which was unincorporated. And what we wanted to do to help stabilize that area and improve it was to build out the entire subdivision at one time. But we didn't have enough grant funding to do it. So the HFA stepped up and provided the construction financing at 4%, which, by the way, is a premium on what we get on our investment portfolio. Broward County donated all 21 lots at no cost. The block grant, community development block grant, and SHIP programs provided the purchase assistance. And we made sure that 1 out of 4 of the homes were a SHIP purchase assistance deal, so we got a little more wealth in the community. The housing staff actually did the pre-qualification for families, and I'll tell you that we pre-qualified twice the number of families we needed, knowing that some dropped out. But the morning that we were taking applications, people were literally camped out in our parking lot all night. So we ended up doing that, qualifying 21 homeowners. The housing division actually paid for the development of 3 model homes, and we wanted to make sure that they were both kind of compliant with the character of the neighborhood, but also significant. So the minimum home, 1,500 square feet, 3 or 4 bedroom with a 2-bath, 2-car garage, and a PVC backyard fence, which, by the way, most of our homeowners are single working moms with kids. And what we had heard from previous initiatives where we're just doing individual lot infill development is there was always a security issue with no fencing in the backyard. So we added that. And then finally, the general fund had allocated capital dollars for that neighborhood because it's one of the few unincorporated areas. So they paid for a decorative concrete masonry wall because the subdivision happens to back up on Sunrise Boulevard. If you're familiar with it, that's a 6-lane divided highway. So this is just an example of a project that was kind of led by the HFA because they came to the table with the big dollars, and then SHIP, block grant, general fund capital, and other resources all came together to develop this project. Next slide, please. So this is not an artist rendering. Back up to the picture, please. This are some of the homes that were built out in that subdivision. You can see how nice they were. Next slide, please. So the final couple of slides are a follow-up to that program because it was very successful, and we happened to have 40 scattered site lots as 10 local nonprofits approached us to do infill on their own. So we allocated all 10 of them 4 lots apiece. One of the 4 was always a SHIP loan for purchase assistance. So we blended in moderate income residents in with the others. The HFA didn't provide the construction financing in this option. What happened was we told, because 40 lots was too much for us to absorb, we had the nonprofits actually come to the table with the construction financing. We gave them a $20,000 upfront loan for pre-development. We provided them block grant and SHIP purchase assistance like the previous project. We provided them free construction plans using the same home models. And again, the county did the outreach on it and conducted the lottery. What happened at the end of the program, we realized that many of the nonprofits had gone to the South Florida Regional Planning Council because they have a lending program, and they were actually doing construction lending on several of the homes, but had a limit on what they could do. So about 2 months ago, we entered into an interlocal agreement with the Regional Planning Council. And the HFA has a revolving construction loan program with them. Again, we got 3% interest, which is much higher than what we're getting in our investment portfolio. And all 40 lots are constructed. And the next slide will show you an example of what people are living in. So there's one of our homes, one of 3 models, and kind of a side note is that when we started this process after the recession, no appraisers could bring a comp to the table. They didn't know what the lots were worth. Right now, there's probably at least a dozen private infill homes on private vacant lots, and those lots are going from $20,000 to $30,000 a piece. So it's been a big success. The sheriff's office says crime is down. It's a visible improvement in the neighborhood. And so those are kind of 3 different types of programs and different ways that the HFA has been involved. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have anyone that comes up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. I think, you can see as a board member that there's a process in getting to where Broward HFA got to. There's a process of recognizing the need. There's a process of how are we going to address that? What are the resources out there? Who are our potential partners out there? And then trying to execute on some of those ideas. Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes everybody's there, and ready, but they don't have all the pieces. So it takes somebody to sit down and look at the pieces and try to figure out how they go together to actually make something happen. So looks like you've had a lot of successful programs. I had a couple of bond questions back with Debbie. Are you still there? You have to show your webcam.
I was on mute.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So the question is, when there's resources in terms of bond allocation, anybody can answer this actually. Why do single family versus multifamily? How do you make that decision? Why do, take your MCCs, take all that bond allocation and use for MCCs? What's the trade-off, or how do you make those decisions as an HFA?
I mean, I guess it really depends on what is the need of the HFA, and what kind of, is there opportunity to do multifamily versus single family? There's not a lot, so MCCs are a little bit more efficient than, the allocation is a little more efficient for MCCs than for bonds, because you need less allocation for MCCs than you do bonds. And if you don't have the resources to do a single family bond issue, and you need resources for negative arbitrage and cost of issuance, then you wouldn't allocate a tremendous amount of funds for single family if there's a higher need for multifamily. So I think you just have to weigh for what kind of housing is needed in each of the counties to determine how you're going to allocate, the resources.
Right. And in terms of your single family, why do a grant if, how long do most of the second mortgages stay outstanding before they become a grant? And why do a grant when you might be able to get the money back eventually to recycle it?
I guess the reason to do a grant is if you're given money from the federal government. So Florida Housing did a tremendous amount of grants because they were given money from the federal government, the hardest hit funds. And I think they were told to do grants in that regard. So you want to give the money away. You want to get the money out to benefit each of the counties. Another reason why you might want to do a grant is that it's better for the homeowner not to have to pay it back. It makes the mortgage a lot more attractive if it is a grant. For the HFA, it's better not to do a grant, because then you can get the money back when a loan is repaid, and usually it's somewhere between an average of 7 to 12 years. You can recycle them, and you can benefit more borrowers.
More a matter of resources. Yeah, it's more a matter of what resources you have and how you need to apply them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Randy, you're up.
If we could advance to my presentation, Lisa. Thank you. I'm Randy Wilkerson, and basically I wanted to talk with you a little bit more so about how to work with your local government, local staff that are outside the HFA in order to more productively work in the whole affordable housing arena. And there's kind of two areas that I think work really well. One is just in the whole planning function. And just to run through a few things, basically all 67 counties participate in some way in the SHIP program. And of course, many cities do, either in conjunction with their county or separately as a SHIP eligible city. But in all those cases, they're required to do what's called an LHAP, or a local housing assistance plan. Those plans typically are for 3 years. You can do less, but most do 3-year plans. And there's an opportunity when those plans are developed for folks, be it neighborhood groups or individuals or agencies or housing finance authorities, to have input into that plan and to look at different opportunities that are presented through that plan and actually provide input into it, such that you might have programs that the HFA has an interest in that could mirror or marry up with ideas that are in that plan. You can also find all of the current local housing assistance plans on Florida Housing Finance Corporation's website. So if you want to go and look and see what, in the event you don't know what the local housing assistance plan is for a given county that you're interested in or you're working in. You can actually find it there. Another is the consolidated plan. All entitlement jurisdictions, as well as the state of Florida, are required to do what's known as a consolidated plan in order to receive CDBG home, ESG, and some other dollars. There was neighborhood stabilization program. There have been some special programs oriented toward disaster that have been allocated in the consolidated plan process. Again, that is a plan. It's typically 3 to 5 years. Whenever that plan is being developed, there has to be opportunity for input, again, from agencies to public. There has to be public meetings. Many, especially of the larger jurisdictions, do actual neighborhood meetings. Some do a series of neighborhood meetings to put together a consolidated plan. Again, this is another kind of ideal opportunity to be able to put HFA wishes into that plan or to promote things that would be compatible with that plan. Another arena, which especially with the rental assistance demonstration called the RAD program, that we're starting to see more interest in, is the housing assistance plan that the Section 8 programs, the housing choice voucher programs, and the public housing agencies have to prepare. Because in that housing assistance plan, much like the other plans we've already discussed, they lay out basically the public housing agency, they lay out their plans for funding, activities, priorities, etc., for the next many years. And in many cases, there is great opportunity for the HFAs to work with a local public housing authority, either in a redevelopment project, an ACT rehab project, or maybe a new project that has some Section 8 project-based set-aside in it, things like that. And again, getting involved in the planning process kind of gets that a concept of working together out front. The Local Housing Advisory Committee, which I know probably everybody's familiar with, is a requirement that's associated with the SHIP program. So all the programs have to have an Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and it's made up of kind of a laundry list of appointees representing various realtors, builders, labor, etc. But there's also an opportunity for the HFA to be represented on committees such as this. And again, that's just another opportunity to have your voice heard, to be involved, to be an active participant in the local community, because that committee kind of helps shape maybe not so much a lot of the what I call down in the weeds part of the housing assistance plan, but some of the activities dealing more with permitting process and things of that nature. One other thing is, I think having worked on the SHIP CDBG home side of the house and now on the HFA side, I think there's a real common practice of everything is kind of siloed. And so we kind of have our own thing that we do, and we do it very well, but we're not maybe as often willing to try to reach some point of consensus on how to go about projects. I think the Franklin Park Estates that Ralph described is a prime example of when it works well. But really, the more we can find common ground, the better off we'll all be in the end, because we'll be able to put together developments and projects that really work, because more and more, there's not enough funding from any one source to get everything done. So you have to blend in order to make it happen. And then probably the one that's obvious is to actually get to know, and I think most of us do, but get to know the housing and planning staff. I'll support them, for example, when they've got some important item going before their Board of County Commissioners or their City Planning Commission or their City Council. And basically, since we're all in the affordable housing arena together, you know, show up and help in that vein, even if it's just to be there as support. Could we go to the next slide, please? Could we advance to the next slide, please? Thank you. The other arena, which is one I think we're all very familiar with, but one that I think sometimes there's an uneasiness about doing, is the whole role of advocacy. Basically, most, if not, and I think probably all the HFAs provide some level of support for the seed fund, which has been instrumental, as we know, in at least ensuring the continuity of the SHIP program. Even though we've had some good years, bad years, still the fact that it's still around is largely due to the HFA support in this arena. So I think just basically understanding how important the HFAs are to that whole process and having the mechanics that are necessary to ensure that the Housing Trust Fund remains in place from year to year to year is an important thing for board members to understand, because it's something that without that piece, having, again, worked in the SHIP program from the day it started when I was at the county, I can truly tell you, I don't think it would still be around today, but for that support. Another thing is something actually that Jamie Ross mentioned on one of the recent webinars from Florida Housing Coalition, is to coordinate with, in essence, a local or an area-wide Sadowski coalition. If we all are familiar with the statewide Sadowski coalition. Well, in reality, we all have home builders, laborers, realtors, Catholic charities, all those organizations, or at least a lot of them, are represented in our local communities. So in terms of helping kind of coalesce a group that can advocate for affordable workforce housing, can help support the seed effort, et cetera, from a local standpoint, kind of a coalition locally made up of representatives of those groups. And this could be the AHAC in a sense. It could be a lot of the same people that are on the AHAC that we talked about earlier. Still, that's kind of an important way to get that same group together at local area, local areas, rather than it just being state. Meeting with state legislators. I know there's kind of a feeling sometimes that, the SHIP folks, the SHIP staff really are the ones that primarily should meet with the legislators. But in reality, going either with the SHIP staff or, and that's the ideal, I think, is to go with them, or to just support them by going separately. I think that gives the legislators a feel for what the HFAs do. The HFAs can also point out how important working with the SHIP staff is, how important the SHIP funds are, et cetera. So it just adds one more layer to that advocacy. Another arena is all county governments and for the most part city governments provide a list of legislative priorities, legislative wants each year through their legislative delegation. And in many cases, it's important to get affordable housing or workforce housing into that priority list, even if it's just setting it as a priority with or without funding. Obviously, we always would love to have the funding to go with it, but I think getting it into that list is important. Then also participating in media coverage, like if the city or county, their public information offices typically have staff that are very adept at putting together workforce housing, celebrations, things of that nature. And it's very easy to become involved in that, just kind of work through the PIO or with the housing staff at the city or county. And then essentially just participating in neighborhood events or community events. Could we advance to the next slide, please? Okay, and this was meant to just be something to think about. You know, basically, if we can simplify our procedures, and obviously the local government can simplify theirs to make it easier for all us to work together, at least getting something done will be less painful than maybe it is now with trying to abide by our respective sets of regulations and requirements, et cetera, to move something forward. Okay, would you on to the next slide, please? And for let's see, could we advance to the next slide, please? And for my last few minutes here, I'm just going to hit very quickly on some local initiatives that the HFA and Escambia, and again, we serve a number of smaller counties primarily, but a number of counties throughout the state. But we have developed this urban infill program, much like the one that Ralph described, that at this point is only in Escambia County. We basically have a revolving line of credit, $2 million. It's available to what I call mom and pop builders. It's just small builders. Many of them work out of their home. And essentially we provide them a $100,000 construction loan. They can also use their loan to buy property as part of the program. We have the capacity to have between 18 and 20 houses active at any one time. Obviously, some of those may be just starting, some may be, finishing. And then the requirement is basically they be sold to first-time home buyers that meet the eligibility requirements for our first-time home buyer program. We do work a great deal with the city and county, Pensacola and Escambia County community development agencies, and we also focus in the target areas for our program. And these photos are just some examples of homes that we have done. You can see there's a lot of variety. These homes are in mostly in the downtown or close to downtown area, but they're in different neighborhoods. Therefore, they're different looks because they're kind of fitting in with the neighborhood that they're in. If you could advance to the next slide, please. Kind of, again, in a similar fashion to what Ralph described, we, in the infill program, have been working with, primarily at this point, the city of Pensacola, to use either tax deed lots or escheated lots for development of homeownership housing. And these are just two examples of infill lots that were provided to us by the city of Pensacola. And the house on the right obviously is completed and occupied and has been occupied probably a year. The one on the left is under construction and should be finished in about a month and a half. If we could go to the next slide, please. Just real quickly, I will just say that the local government area of opportunity funding or financing process that Florida Housing Finance Corporation has been rolling out now for the last few years has really provided an opportunity for the HFAs to play as strong a role as we want to in the process of helping select developments, primarily obviously rental developments, but select developments and help prioritize those developments in our local communities. Essentially, I think over time, you can see that Florida Housing is using this process to allow the locals to help select the project that is their priority, as opposed to necessarily all of that selection being done by Florida Housing Finance Corporation. So I think it's an ideal opportunity to get involved and work with, again, your local SHIP office, whoever, housing office, whoever does the RFP process or whatever process is used in the local community to help select those deals. The HFAs really have the expertise to do the analysis that's required on these sometimes complicated rental developments. I think most local governments, especially the smaller communities, the smaller counties that we work with a lot, they really, I think, would readily admit that they don't have that expertise. So that's a role that the HFAs can really, really fill. Okay, could we go on to the next slide, please? Okay, the last thing that I'm going to mention is our executive director, Pat Lott. She came up with essentially an idea to work more effectively with our SHIP DPA entities, so our local SHIP offices. And essentially what we did was, because it's so difficult often to change the SHIP program procedures, what we did was look at, well, can we develop a process that just kind of overlays the SHIP DPA approval process, but we use our first mortgage in conjunction with the SHIP DPA without requiring the SHIP offices to radically change what they do day to day. And we've kind of rolled this out in Escambia County. We're gearing up to roll it out in a couple of other counties that we serve, and over time may roll it out even more. But essentially, it kind of goes back to that initial point about finding commonality with programs and trying to reach a point where the programs are compatible with one another. And so far, we've kind of reached that point where it will work. And in effect, we're able to offer a very low interest rate because we're not required to provide the DPA. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Thank you.
I just want to remind everybody that all their presentations that you've seen today will be on the website, so you can go back and look at those. I had a question for both Ralph and Randy, and we're over time, so I don't know how long we'll be going here, but we may not, but it'll be on the website so we can talk about it. And it's about the infill that you did. Ralph, the infill, are there any ongoing costs to the HFA, or once the home is sold, that's the end of your involvement in it? Ralph, you first, and then Randy.
Sure, thank you. Well, yeah, once we sell the home, we're all done.
Same
Okay.
here. Same here. We're at the point of sale, then it's the homeowner from there on. We're not involved anymore.
And is there any affordability requirement on a resale, or is you're done at that point?
And on ours, if there's a SHIP or block grant purchase assistance mortgage, it's on the property for 15 years, and there's no amortization, but if the property owner stays in the home for 15 years, then it's wiped out.
Okay, Randy?
And I would clarify, we the HFA do not invoke any resale restrictions, but now that was Ralph said that, it made me, if we do have a buyer who uses SHIP or CDBG for purchase assistance, which has happened, then those requirements would apply.
Okay. Mark, did you get any more questions that came in that we need to address?
Not that we need to address, thank you. And there may be a few that will get back to individuals who sent the questions in directly later on.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you for the people that are out that we can't see. We appreciate you taking your lunchtime to do this, but you know, it will virtually clap to our speakers today and thank them for their participation. So that's a wrap.
Thanks. And everybody's still on the mic. So Lisa, if you could shut it down, that would be great. And let us know that we're off, Lisa.
Please. Is she talking to you?
No.
Mark, I've still got a phone line open. You want me to go ahead and close it out?
Yes, thanks, Ralph.
Well, we're trying.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys. You did a great job.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I guess to be.
Hey,
just hang
Debbie.
up.
Debbie, you there? Don't hang up. So why would you ever do a grant?
Well, I wouldn't.
Well, that's what your answer should have been.
Yeah, but there are HFAs that do